All right, seems as though we have a quorum, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. My name is Taylor Shawver. I am a strategy manager at Integral. Integral is an employee activation agency that specializes in employee communications, digital transformation, culture, and change. Our team at Integral created Integral Circles to bring people together in our industry to learn from one another and hear what other people are working on. So today is not only an opportunity to ask questions and hear from our guest, but also to connect with one another in the chat. So please drop your questions along the way in the Q&A box below, or chat with one another, get to know each other in the chat box as well. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce today's guest and our topic, Jason Andrews. Jason is the VP of Digital Marketing at IBM. So not only does Jason oversee over 500 digital marketers, he is also responsible for a 200+ transformation project team. This team is responsible for one of the biggest digital transformations IBM Marketing has seen to date. So this team is transferring the marketing technology stack over to the Adobe suite of projects. So today we're going to hear from Jason a bit about how he approached staffing the team, lessons and challenges he's learned along the way, and his advice to other leaders entering any type of transformation. So Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great. And hopefully we can get as quickly as possible into, good discourse, as I'm as interested to hear from others that I can't see at the moment as hopefully as they are interested in hearing about our transformation.
Awesome. Thanks. And thanks for joining us. So before we dive into the specifics around the transformation your team is responsible for, Jason, could you just share with the group a bit about your background, your experience, and what led you to the role you're in today?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you check me out on LinkedIn, you're probably thinking that's a pretty wackadoo background, because I would have been considered, I think 10 years ago, if anyone was trying to hire me, an extreme flight risk, meaning the guy who can't stay in one thing or one company for a while. But I also think all of those things have prepared me for the latest job that I had. And I'd probably start by saying that whole mentality shifted, I think, pretty drastically over the last few years. I think people who get more diverse, we talk about diversity a lot, but diversity of background and just in general, they tend to be really good at things like with ambiguity and these types of projects. My background started, weirdly enough, in the military, and I was an officer in the Air Force, and I did my 4 years and got out. I've done a lot of different things since then, whether there's some industry work with the United Airlines and Centos. I've done some startup work. I've actually been a part of 3 startups of different varying success. I've done consulting, which I think obviously has a huge, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that I'm leading this type of project. And now in digital marketing. And to me, each one of those has probably, like I said, prepared me for the gig at hand, which is this really enormous transformation that you called out. Being able to deal with, bureaucracy in the military, I think, and the size and scale and scope prepared me for this a lot. I think a lot of people think of the military, it's, marching, or yelling. It's actually a business. It's sitting at a desk. It's a large business, actually. I apologize for the background. That's going to happen in this. But that gave me a lot about scale. And then you got the startup world where you learn about speed. And to be honest, the startup world is where I always learn most about actual skills that I can bring to different pieces. And then I think you get to consulting where you learn about, or you get to see a lot of different operating models for businesses. Again, all of those come together and they've taught me what I would like to do or what I should be doing in something like this versus also some things I see that I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, awesome. Wide-ranging background for sure. And Jason, your background was pretty directly responsible for the branding and naming of the transformation team and project at IBM. For those of you joining us, the project is coined Afterburner. So Jason, why the term Afterburner? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, two things if you're going to come up with a name for something was I think it should mean something to you because then you can sound certainly more candid, certainly more genuine as you talk about it. And second, it should be conceptual, I think, and actually so you can build off of it as we've done in a lot of our comms. Instead of calling something a checklist, you can call it a flight check, right? So we've done a lot of fun, playful things with that. The background, or obviously not surprisingly, the name comes from my background is the time I served in the military. An afterburner, in a sense, is like a turbo for a car. You throw it on the engine. The engine is only making so much power that you put a turbo or afterburner on an engine, and all of a sudden, boom, you got a tremendous amount of extra boost. It can't last forever, so hence the project thought. It's got a beginning and an end. So this is fuel. It's just fuel to our organization. We have an engine. It's running. It's really close to max boost. And then we threw this project on, which we again call affectionately afterburner. That gives you the extra boost, the extra time and speed to transformation. And then you go back to sort of normal, flight time or whatever with the engine running at normal speed. That's how we thought about this as a booster.
Yeah, that's great. And we've definitely had a lot of flight puns with the comms for sure.
We've had a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
Going off of it being a boost, could you share more about what you envision as this project's goals and responsibilities?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned obviously the technology side, right? So we are leveraging most or a large portion of the Adobe platform. And I think that could be its own whole integral webinar, to be honest, is a shift from, multiple, different sorts of platforms that go into a tech stack. Everyone's seen the chart I talk about all the time where it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's like, there's 500 things, there's 1,000. And I think what people are realizing a little bit is that's great. It's great that you can pick and choose all of those, and APIs have made the world a lot easier, but it's hard to integrate it all, especially when you're running it the size we are. It's hard to sort of interchange as much as was promised. We are going to go for the integration part. So that's a big part. Just having tools that can help you integrate themselves. For us, we've also thought about this obviously as a transformation. The technology isn't going to do it all. It's just forcing function for us to transform. It's why we've been so focused or adamant about, and I hate the word out of the box, but as much as possible, low customization of the tools. We know they work. In fact, I know they work. I've actually used them in a startup before. And anytime someone says, oh, it's, they sort of bring in the complexity, I go, yeah, that complexity is not needed, right? And it sort of forces us to transform out of the complexity into a more sort of simple, templated world, which actually allows for diversity of content, diversity of messaging, diversity of audience and personalization. That's the cool part. That's a transformative part. And we're leveraging, I think, the tools in the stack to do or to convince our marketers that it is actually about that kind of stuff, the content, the ability to do things. We might get into this a little bit later, but the ability to do some more of the higher orders of magnitude tasks rather than like the repetitive automated tasks that we can sort of automate out. So that's the sell. That's what we're really focused on. And I think, again, the technology allows us the permission, I think, to hopefully make that kind of transformation leap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard from you too, the emphasis on this transformation being more than just the technology, but really focused on the human side of it. So how would you say that Project Afterburner balances both the technology side of the transformation, platform launches, go lives, and sunsets with the human side of how this is actually impacting the humans in the roles of marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, now you're getting into the change management piece, I think, of all these projects. Change management, I've been a consultant, so everybody always says it's the number one thing, but then they bring those folks on last, which I've always found a little funny and ironic. But it is about, how you can, one, convince there's a value exchange, right? Like we are, in a lot of ways, there's some automation, some centralization. People feel like stuff's getting taken away, and that's not really what's happening. It's what we're giving. And you talk and you always sort of lead with that. Here's what you're going to get. Imagine a world if you could do this. It's why we've actually brought other companies who successfully undergone transformations to come in and talk to our marketers about the art of the possible future. I don't like to get too rooted in the technology and what it's going to deliver. I mean, it's again, an integrated model, but like it could be as integrated as possible. But if the marketing isn't integrated, or if people aren't thinking in an omni-channel way or personalization first, it's not going to be successful. So that's where we really try to get the buy-in from our marketers in there. And as we talk a little bit about how we stand this up, we've also actually we brought a lot of marketers into the transformation, something I've not seen before. And there are a lot of folks who are actually part of the transformation team. And so we're sort of, it's not one of those things where someone says we're going to deliver to you. It's you're going to help us deliver to the rest of marketing. I think that's helped as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening has been such a big part of this transformation as well. Not only bringing marketers into the team, but also listening to marketers who may not be a part of it along the way to see how messages are resonating. You mentioned some of the lessons that you've learned from past transformations. What else did you learn from those transformations you were part of in the past? And how did that inform how you approach setting up this transformation team?
Yeah. Well, I've been done on two. I've had people, do transformations and tell me what I was getting. I have done onto others and been, again, a consultant and brought in to do it, or even internally in marketing. I've led some consultative gigs before. So I've seen a lot. And to me, the general mistakes that I see large transformations make are, number one, they tend to go into a black box. Someone will announce it, there'll be a lot of fanfare, and then there's 2 or 3 years of tooling. There's a lot of requirements gathering, but it's all sort of behind the scenes, and then ta-da, like right towards the end, you'll start to see the rollout phase plans, and everybody sort of freaks out at that point. So that's one, I think, and we certainly tried to mitigate that by being, we brought in all that change management and comms to start, and we built out an internal site to start, and we've been as transparent as possible about what we're doing. All of our project plans are live. You can see them anytime. They can change. We want to see when we miss a deadline. You can go as granular to literally our 2-week planning schedule if you would like. We did that to make sure that people could see what was happening and ride along with us. Probably one of the second ones that I've seen done is that generally you'll bring in a consulting group and they'll do again onto you. You're not as part of the model as much. It'll be someone who's in a project office, but most of it's sort of kept hands length away until it's ready. Again, as I mentioned before, almost probably close to half or a little less than half of this project is staffed by our marketers. And twofold. One is they're invested, and who knows better about what we're doing than we do, I think. But again, we also trust our agency and consultative partners to give us the stuff we don't know. So there's a learning exchange that's happening as we're even leveraging this. That's on both sides of that coin. The second is, and we haven't seen the benefits yet, but I'm hoping is when we turn this thing over to marketers, people know how to use it. A lot of times where I've seen, I've been on, again, one side and delivered, and I'm like, I don't think anybody knows what we're doing or how to leverage the new systems. And we're going to have a lot of people who know how to leverage the new system. So I think that's pretty fantastic as well. And then I think the last part, which we talked about, is just, how the comms is so important as it comes out. And again, that's probably a plug to the Integral team, but we early on we just said, hey, we're gonna over communicate to our marketers about what's happening. And I think we've done a really good job with that. But it's a feedback loop. We've had a lot of inputs. We've had a lot of open AMA Slack stuff, and I think that just gets people feeling, at some level comfortable with what we're going. We answer questions. We haven't done a ton of requirements gathering, to be straightforward. I think requirements gathering is great if you're trying to stick to the current state model. It's not so great if you're trying to go to a future state model. And we spent a good amount of time on that. So those have been there. I'll add one more little, I'll booster as I play on the Afterburner theme is the other thing I now have learned, and I don't know how intentional it was, but it certainly our CEO mandated this, and maybe he is really had a real understanding of what was going to happen. Do as much as you can as fast as you can. I think, like, if you were going to take a budget and be like, is this a 3-year project? Is it a 1? Is it whatever? Front load as much as you can. The dollars probably aren't as efficiently used because you're definitely throwing a lot at the problem early. But what I've also seen that sort of crops up is you're trying to go down this like pathway, and in any business that's always in transforming, something happens and you just keep like kind of resetting through the next 3 years. We've actually got a lot of our project done. We delivered value early and often in this thing, which is another really big one, is the agile delivery. We have something we call minimal viable experience, which we play off the MVP thought in agile, which is where we're delivering little chunks of value along the way. And that has been pretty amazing. Email launch in basically a month. We've had systems get stood up super quick. We have a page, just one page is live right now, where a lot of people would have launched that in like a year when every single thing was ready. And what you get out of that is the ability to test your thoughts early in real world conditions, but people start seeing value from the payoff quicker too, without all the churn that sort of comes in multi-year projects. So it's been pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, also amidst just a lot of change happening within the organization as a whole too, right? You have new leadership with the new CMO. IBM is constantly transforming. I mean, from the communications perspective and reaching marketers, it seems like, Project Afterburner has done a good job, but what is your thought on why it's so successful at cutting through some of the noise?
Yeah. By the way, that CMO point's a really good reason why you get as much done as early as possible, because that kind of stuff is going to happen in any organization. So, it could have been one of those things where, we actually moved really slow, but we kind of started building something, and then all of a sudden, she shows up and has a completely different vision. Luckily, she doesn't, but where you kind of just do a reset. So anyway, that was a very interesting point. I think to your question, we've again been very into letting our marketers know about that value delivery all the way through. That to me has been really key. I think that you got to set up a really strong foundation of mission, vision, purpose, be very transparent about that, have an internal, way to communicate with all the marketers. And by the way, this is inside the project and outside the project. We've had, folks on the team, even I think you heard it's like 300 people deep who need to all get aligned to the same plan. And I think we've done a really good job of aligning around that, communicating it out, taking the feedback loop, rechanging our plan as much as possible and releasing it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we actually have a question in the chat, and not to diverge just yet, but I think it's very timely. Matthew asks, from an internal comms perspective, how do you keep your team informed with bigger picture goals? So sticking to that vision and mission while not distracting them on the immediate task.
Yeah, it's a really good one. And we kind of do a lot of like zoom out, zoom in stuff. I think we've done a really good job of that. We started actually outside communicating our mission and vision. And that I think is, just putting that out. But we've actually zoomed in and started, again, I mentioned we have people who come in from other companies and told us high level, what did this mean for them? But they started actually getting a little bit deeper into the project, the products themselves, talking about how they got affected. We've had demos, extremely lower level. And so that is the technology work, right? And then we kind of zoomed back out. Now we're doing really cool things where we're actually building clickable prototypes, the future model. And we're showing them the experiences that our customers can have. And we're literally leaving those out inside of our internal site as well, where they can go through and actually play through their clickable prototypes that we're going to deliver. I think that's what you're always sort of doing, is going, myopic for a bit, where like very macro and micro back and forth. Hey, remember, this is what we're trying to do, but this is actually how it's also going to affect you. Don't forget the big thing, that keeps going there. Because if you go in any one of those directions too much, it either gets extremely tactical and people start to talk about, when am I going to get my template? And that's not what we want people thinking about. Or like, when is my email going to be ready? And then if you get too big picture, it just feels like it's so far away from you to really accomplish it. It just doesn't get there. And it's a yo-yo effect. I think the team's done a really good job of that. Like we create editorial content basically, where we go a very high level. Remember, we're going to do a podcast on something like a big picture thing on personalization, and we go down into the a little bit deeper into the weeds on something else. That's the other part, is really structuring, I think, your comms plan to make sure you're hitting on all of those different pieces. So you can see it in an editorial board. It comes out really well.
Yeah, I love your description of a yo-yo. I feel like that's very accurate. And one of the things that is so inspiring about the Afterburner transformation and specifically around communications and enablement is the listening program. So really doing focus groups with marketers along the way. You know, we heard at the beginning, oh, this is really high level. What does it mean? And when you start to get to some of the tactical, it's like, actually, that might be too tactical. So really understanding what resonates too along the way of the transformation, I think is something that I've seen beneficial to this project.
I'll add one thing we did too, which was, we created boards of directors that sit at each work stream level, just as an interesting thought. I mean, again, that's like a very startup thing, but we wanted to infuse that. An organization of this size, again, if you go out and ask everybody what they want, you're going to get everything that they want. And I've actually seen some of our internal projects go quite awry because they're trying to requirements gather, I want this, I want the opposite of that. What are those two things? We instead, I think, shrunk the pool of people and said, if you're going to be a part of this, you can actually be on our side. So they're a board. We actually run stuff by them. We have a tech board, we have a marketing board, we have different work stream boards. And there is where you're supposed to test the ideas. You pick very influential people out in the world, the marketing world, so you can go out back and say, hey, I actually approved this. And so that's actually been another way to a bit buffer. It's between everybody having a point of view and a say and nobody having a point of view and a say. And that's actually also helped us on the comms front. We've leveraged them a bit to go out and be a part of our internal comms drumbeat and speak out as well. And that's been really cool.
Absolutely. And setting up just even a council with different disciplines who can be tapped into some of the work happening to communicate.
Yep.
That's great. We have a pretty tactical question, which I think is timely, around from Gia. How is your Afterburner team segmented? Is it by demographics, psychographics, or by skills and experiences?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's a little bit like most good consultative answers, a bit of both. We have what's called our work streams, which are actually, I think, much more focused around the platform. So that would be much more, I think, people who are oriented around that. So we have an audience platform, which we're doing. We have our audience marketers. Our analytics crew is pulled from that, and they're sort of sitting around there. And those are cross-functional, right? So each team has a marketing sort of lane, a technology lane, a PMO lane, experiences lane, and transfer business consultants, I'd call them lane too. So they're all integrated, working together. Well, we realized there's some things that are going to cross all of those streams. I think that's where we started. We started building out guilds, right? And so we have an experiences guild, which actually is a good example of design and IA, and they actually sit together and look across the platform, which helps us to make a lot of integration points. If you let 5 work streams go off and do work, you will get 5 different results every time. There's 100% guarantee. We have a marketing stream that sits across and looks at the MVEs, if you remember, our minimum viable experiences, how quickly we can come to market. We have a tech guild that's looking at the architecture across. So they're actually, again, looking at all the different moving pieces and creating the whole on architecture. And I think again, we've had some really great feedback from our own. We're delivering our own projects. We have our GBS team who does our service consultancy stuff. They're like, hey, we're learning here. This is, first of all, we don't generally have this many people from the client on our teams, which has been a little bit of a start thing, but it works. It's actually great once you get to it. And 2, we've actually not structured projects this way. Again, generally it's, work stream, and then there's a PMO office, and you created these guilds that are looking across a lot of different ways. And so I think that's, it gets a lot of the little moving pieces. There's definitely like, hey, we're designers, we're all together. Great, that's that. But then there's cross-functional teams that are running here. That's also great. And every once in a while, there's something truly unique that needs its own thing, like forms, or we would create a little mini squad, and they'll actually go off and work on a little bit of a big chunk of the project and then bring it back. And then, our job is the center of excellence, which is where, there's sort of, it's kind of like a PMO office, but it's actually by function, sits in and watches all of the stuff and tries to be the orchestration engine across.
Yeah, very complex, but it seems to keep you all moving. We have quite a few questions in the chat. I have 2 more to ask before we get there. you all are 1 year into the transformation. What are some lessons or challenges that you faced along the way?
Let's start on the challenge. Well, challenges for sure is bringing up a different model and having to work across, multiple agency, consultancy, humans, and just everybody getting together. It took a while because everybody was like, "That's not how you do a project. I don't, know what I do with my arms." But most of the time, it was, there's just a lot of like, who, what, you, me, bumping into each other stuff. But it was worth it, and we stayed really core to what we wanted with the principles of what we're trying to get to. And I think everybody sort of got on board, and now no one can go back and think about it any differently. But it was definitely a little bumpy on the way. In the lessons learned category, I'd say a couple. Let's see, I'll throw them out and see how different they are. One is just, it's a little bit of a game of chess. I'm realizing being a leader of these types of things, because you think you're like rotating for transparency, and what you realize is, and time to market and value soon. But then you realize the counterpoint from the marketing team is anxiety, right? Because now they're seeing, oh my God, when is this going to hit me? And they think it looks like it's coming faster than it is. This is still a 2 or 3 year transformation. We just front loaded a lot of it in the beginning, and now we're rolling to the back. So there's something about, if I go back and do it again, we keep doing value delivery early. We keep being super transparent about what's happening. But I'd also, talk a little bit more about, also, guys, remember, this is a 2 or 3 year thing, because we sort of over rotated, I think, to look how fast we're moving and how great we're doing, rather than saying, I know you're seeing stuff like a page just went live, but actually you won't be on the CMS until a year from now, that kind of stuff. So a little bit of back and forth measuring there, I think, would be a huge shift. And I think, Taylor, we've learned that a little bit as we've seen it. And then, I think just thinking about personalization a little bit, we created, our target work stream. We called it personalization. And, that was where we were going to have the personalization come from. I go back in time and I think about it, even as we're thinking about it now, and I go, personalization cannot be a work stream. It is truly, if you're doing it right, omni-channel, and it's really just something very different, right? We probably would have built that out as a squad, and I think we still might rotate into that. We're still trying to figure out what we do, but I think personalization in itself is, if you're doing it right, all of the work streams themselves and the technology are coming together. And I think trying to run it as a linear, work stream, it made it seem like it was something different than it was. I'd go back and probably take a look at that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And to your earlier point, it really is that yo-yo effect, right?
Move, counter move is what I learned with humans. And right, when you think you're delivering what they want, there's another thing sort of on the other side of it that's like, oh yeah, I guess now they're anxious, Where before, if you just went in a black box, everyone forgets that you've been doing anything, and then you bring the anxiety in just right at the last moment. Now it's sort of all the time anxiety because we're so transparent. It's a counterpoint of, well, transparency. I still think you should be transparent. I think now you just even got to be transparent about the timelines.
Yeah, doing that from the very beginning. Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right, Jason, I'm going to transfer over to some of the Q&A in the chat. Thank you all for your questions. Keep them coming. One question pretty relevant to what we were just talking about is, how do you deal with negative feedback from people affected by the transformation?
Yeah, and we've gotten some, I think you can imagine from this. The first is, understand where it's coming from. I think automation's a bad word. Let's just say it out loud. Like, people don't like to hear it. People like doing things the way they're doing them already, because it's a very comforting thing. I always go back to the client experience, because you can't argue it, I guess, right? Like, are you a client? Would you like personalized content that you can find easily and often? Yes. Is what we do that? No. And that is, I think you don't hide behind it, but it's your shield from the way that you do things. Because a lot of times the way people do things is because it's easier for them, or it's organizationally the way things are done. And it doesn't have anything to do with what the client is expecting at the end of the day. That's easily the way that you get out of that cycle, is just, there. And then the other part is, a lot of the criticism we get or around automation is, like something's going to take my job when I do things. And we've done some work already that says, no, actually it won't. I mean, if that's the work you want to be doing, I guess, if you want to be instrumenting automation workflows, I guess that's not really marketing, but if you want to be coming up with great concepts and experiences and journeys and content, this is only empowering you to do that more. And so that's the other argument I think you generally can put in front of somebody. And then there's people who are generally haters, I guess, and I think you have to, we get feedback sometimes, and it's like you have to see that that's happening at scale. Again, if you have enough listening going on, you can kind of play that out there. But those are, to me, the levels, and you have good answers for those.
Absolutely. And there's some people that maybe you can change their mindset along the way. And I think that's one of the things we've been trying to do by really emphasizing on the communications and information of what this will unlock for marketers.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat from Kevin. Could you say more about what the problem is you are trying to solve and how success is to be judged?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think there's no real strong problem. I don't think anybody said, "Hey, let's go to Adobe because we have a big, giant, enormous problem." The reality is we're just not. We're digitally a little bit behind, right? And I think for us, we know the world that we want to get to. Everybody's experienced it, I think, in their B2C lives, and starting to happen a lot of B2B. If there was any problem statement, it's with our customers and trying to keep our experiences relevant to them, to be, as like other things as possible. So that, because people are used to a way of procuring and buying stuff, whatever it is, and marketing to the individual rather than, I think we've struggled a little bit of that. There's data challenges, there's content challenges. But there's just an expectation at this point that people are like, I don't want you to talk generically to me. And that is, if there is ever a problem statement in marketing, I don't think it's an IBM say that's generally the problem statement. Like, and how do you do that while also not violating my privacy? Which is also just an interesting, like, those two things are really different. But we're working on how to do that, right? And how to keep, the sort of we call it obviously the cookieless future of where the world is going, versus also I want more hand raising moments to be there. That is why that's one part that gets us there, which is, okay, well, some technology will help. And again, the other part is just transforming our marketing to our marketers to, the future, right? The future of marketing, which I think, as we've all seen in the last year, heavily digital, heavily personalized in that sense, and relevant, right? And also clear and simple, right? I think the good old days of what I would call brand marketing, which actually to me just means put as much content out as possible because someone will hit it at some point and you're just trying to get your brand out there, is just a very different concept from the kind of marketing we do now, which brand is still an anchor, but it's actually about how does a brand resolve with, or, get along with you, right? What does it mean to you, the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I will say that I admire a lot about IBM's marketing team is the ability to listen to feedback too. I mean, in one of the all hands, there was a whole segment on just customer mean tweets, and people were very much, understanding where it's at and excited for how we can get to that future vision.
Got to be able to make fun of yourself, or you're not going to live in this business. Because we're I think I don't think we're super unique in that sense, but you go out and see what your customers are saying about your stuff, and then take it to heart and make it better.
Absolutely. Okay, so another question we got in the chat: as a leader dealing with a lot of ambiguity, how do you handle communicating what you know and what you don't know to your team without losing credibility?
Yeah, ambiguity. That's like the consulting word of the day for sure, because there's a lot of it in a project this big. It goes a little bit back into the what we would do a bit differently part, because you want to sound confident, like, you know, everything that's going to happen and what you're getting because you're trying to get buy-in and you're playing that up. But I actually think there's some times where now again, going back, it's okay to be like, hey, we don't actually know the timeline just yet, or when this is going to be live, or exactly how this is too. We're all figuring it out. And again, if you're going to be extremely transparent at the beginning, sometimes if you don't want to do that, you can just go behind closed doors and work on it till you have all the answers, and then try to come back out with the answers. But if you're not going to take that approach, if you're going to be, you know, public facing and to your marketing teams or whatever teams, you know, world folks come from, then you want to, I think you just got to be honest about what you don't know too. And explain how you're getting there, because again, a lot of it, sometimes it's like, hey, we want to do this thing we've never done before. Progressive profiling, good example. We've never done progressive profiling at at the level we're talking about it here. So you can, hey, we're going to get a team together. Would you like to be a part of that team? You know, like, you sort of use that as a moment to bring people in, rather than just sort of saying, I got it all figured out, which we didn't. We still don't, I don't think. We still got a lot to learn.
Absolutely. But even just communicating that now and being honest about it.
Legit. Yeah, way to go about it. I think that gets you, it gives you credibility because it makes all the other things you're saying about what you do know feel more real than if everything is, no, we got you. We understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. We have a question from Ben. What is the biggest surprise in how things have gone?
Well, I describe it, I'll give you my personal take, and then I'll say what I think maybe project wise. I've led big things, but this is maybe the first time in an enterprise org where something's gotten over to the 300 person mark. Personally, I've had to realize, like, I'm a little used to my last team big, but not like that big, and bought into what we were doing. It's like, how do you keep, I used to think of it as like a 4-lane highway and you're just trying to keep everybody sort of on it. This project could be like a 15-lane highway. You know, like, it's out here, and it's just like, personally, how comfortable can you be with, you're just almost trying to get it to an 8-lane highway. You just realize, like, some things are moving like this, and it's just like, how do you let go and let it be, has been a personal deal for me. How surprised I've been about how I'm able to do it, but also just how you have to do it, or there's no way to manage that much movement, that many work streams, that much cross skill. Some of it's just you gotta trust the process and keep honing back in on the frameworks and the visions, and hope a lot of people figure it out. I think project surprise wise is just how quickly we were able to move. I think we've done a lot of stuff extremely fast. Again, I've seen a lot of projects that, you know, they just haven't seen value until year 2 or 3. And every like 2 months we go, oh, something else is live. You know, it's like, it's surprising to me. Another thing is live, a page is live, and emails are live. The system stood up. We've made these big changes. And so I think that's been really just cool for us to be able to see that, that like, this is working. And, you know, you don't know that going in. I've not seen the approach taken as we've done it. You just hopefully have confidence in what you're doing and stick with it. But it's been nice, I think, everybody to see how fast we've been able to get there.
Absolutely. And really living up to the Afterburner name.
Yes. Yeah. Really adding fuel to the fire. And now we're sort of trying to figure out how to get back. You know, a little bit of it is there's what I call transformation fatigue, where you're going to hit it. It just happens in every organization. You've got a lot of, change. And we're adding a lot of change at scale. And then the next step is like, how do we quickly harden that into business as usual, so it feels like it's not, you know, quote unquote afterburner.
Yeah. And Jason, I think that's a great point to lead into. You've mentioned going back to business as usual a few times, and that transformations inevitably have to come to an end. So how are you envisioning going from winding up excitement, getting marketers behind Project Afterburner and the transformation, to then having to wind down and go back to business as usual?
Yeah, it's one of the benefits of not going big bang approach, is that I think we can slowly now throttle back. And then big bang, it's all transformation for a very long time. I think you get a lot of fatigue. You release the thing, then you realize you still got a lot more transformation to do, and it just never seems to end. As we enter year 2, we are thinking about how do we make this look more like business as usual. So there's going to be a half step I think we're going to take. We'll start moving some work streams out into like their actual future living arrangement. We'll still probably have some consultancy help, but actually now we're going to turn it all inside out. Maybe they sit in some of our teams. So rather than everybody being in a cross-functional work stream that's extremely project oriented, maybe there's agency and consultative support that sits more in our teams and gets to help step us down a little bit. It's kind of like coming off of a drug. You just like step it down at a time a little bit, because there's a lot of, everybody gets used to, oh, I've got so much resource and whatever I need to get what I'm get done, what I want to get done. And I think that's a challenge for here. We're going down a little bit to a half step here, and then maybe another half step. And before you know it, I think everybody will be surprised that they're running business as usual. People are already in the right space. Some of the things that we've created out of this project live on forever. Like, we have an experienced team now. We've actually never had in marketing a group that all together across all the different orgs thought about the experience. That could live. That's something that I think could live much longer than we have it now. So that's kind of cool too. It's just watching that. But you definitely, I think, should start thinking about your exit strategy before you get to your exit strategy. Because if you're thinking about it at that time, it's absolutely too late. The plane's crashed. You got to jump out of it before then.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. We still have so many questions in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement. We're going to post a recap and replay of this after today's session. But I would like to transition us a bit. So, Jason, as we approach the last 2 minutes of your session, I thought it would be a little bit fun to bring in the speed round questions that we do on the Internal Transformation podcast to our larger audience today. So are you up for it?
Let's do it. It's afterburner speed.
Afterburner speed. And I'm going to encourage all of you attendees to drop your responses in the chat as well. I'm very curious to hear your responses to these questions too. All right. So with that, let's get started. Jason, who is your airline brand of choice?
Oh, easy. Delta. And Delta, I've made this joke before, but they could fly like there could be literally an American flight going nonstop or a 3 connection flight on Delta. I'll take the 3 connector. They've got me hooked by far, although they're messing up a little bit lately because it's basically impossible to call them. So I don't know if you tried it, but that's my go-to.
Yeah, not great customer experience there. Awesome. What is your favorite plane snack?
Is wine a snack?
Of course it is. Of course.
Here's your answer. Nothing tastes better than crappy airplane red wine if you get it, because it's just, for some reason, you're like, oh, this wine tastes good on this plane. Wouldn't drink it anywhere else. So
I love it. What song is always guaranteed to pump you up?
Back to the military days. I was stationed in Kuwait for a year. Not surprisingly, they played Bombs Over Baghdad every morning at 6 a.m. to wake you up. And that song, if you've heard of it by Outkast, will definitely get you fired up for sure.
Love it.
Oh, by the way, I like this Bombay Sapphire answer to the last one as a snack. That's good.
Amazing. I love your answers in the chat. Thank you. All right. What is one book you would recommend to everyone listening?
I am reading, I've actually just finished the whole Dune series. Movie's coming out. It's pretty nerd stuff. Georgia Bear. If you like really sci-fi stuff, it's probably one of the most or best well-written book series out there. And it's got a lot of like real like macroeconomics, environmental stuff that faces us now. So it's been really kind of an interesting read to go back and do it.
Awesome. Gonna have to check that out. And in one word, how would you describe digital transformation?
Hard.
Hard.
No one said it's easy ever. If someone says it's easy, they're lying to you. And if the consultant's telling you that, you should just run for the hills because they're probably not the right ones. It's hard.
I love it. Well, thank you, Jason, so much for your time, for indulging me in this speed round. Thank you to all of you for joining and for your questions. Again, we'll publish a recap and replay. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jason.